Android skins evil? And our in-depth review of the HTC One X, this week on SpoonFed Mobile. So today we're talking about Android and whether or not skins that ride on top of the OS are evil or not, and what sort of use they have as the underlying OS gets more mature and more sleek. And there's been a lot of controversy, especially around HTC, just because they're one of the first out of the gate with a skin that's running on top of ice cream sandwich. And there's been some reviews, positive and negative, around it. I mean, Sascha, maybe we could start with you. In your experience with this skin, right, and anyone who calls it that in front of the companies get really offended because they say we have a deeper level of integration, we're doing a lot more stuff. But a lot of people call it that as sort of a derogatory term. How do you think that this is evolving? Is it evolving in the right way? Is it still too heavy?
I think Sense 4.0 on Android Ice Cream Sandwich is a lot lighter than Sense 3.6 was. And in general, I'm pretty pro these skins because I write for consumers. I want a phone to do pretty much everything it needs to do out of the box. And I want it to operate, frankly, pretty out of the box. I often find that a lot of the guys I talk to who hate skins are people who do heavy configuration on their own devices. They start talking to me about XDA forums, they start talking to me about CyanogenMod and rooting, and in that case, yeah, you're basically building your own skin. But for the vast majority of consumers out there, Android does tend to start out a little stark, missing a couple of key things. Facebook integration is the biggest one by far. And these, HTC Sense can add an extra layer of smoothness to the experience.
Now, Chris, you were one of the first to review the One X, the international version, and I feel like your opinion of Sense 4.0 in particular was mixed. And what was your overall opinion? Do you feel like they didn't quite make enough progress?
So you can definitely see that they took some of the criticism to heart in Sense 4. There's no question about it. In particular, one of the things that really drove me nuts prior to 4 was the fact that they took up, what was it, a quarter or a third of the notification drop-down with a recent apps list, which really served no practical purpose, in my opinion. And of course, the keyboard isn't very good either. I think that if you ask any reviewer, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like virtually any third-party keyboard is superior to the keyboard that they use in Sense, and that hasn't changed in Sense 4, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't think that they've gone far enough. I think that the notion of this OEM customization of Android is kind of antiquated at this point, because they're still looking at it from a pre-ICS view where, frankly, the UX sucked. And then they brought in Matthias Forte, of course, and he made a lot of changes in Android 4, and we're seeing that, and I think that it's far better than it's ever been before. Unfortunately, what's really ironic to me is that the experience, the so-called stock Android experience that you get on the Galaxy Nexus, you'd think that would be like this broad base of devices that are using this, and then you have a few other devices that are customizing on top of that. But actually the opposite is true. It's virtually impossible to get the stock experience. There are very few phones that offer that, and they're few and far between. The Galaxy Nexus on Verizon, of course, is one of the very few. So.
But at the same time, they have done some things, just playing devil's advocate, HTC has done that I think add to the user experience. Just something as simple as the lock screen itself and being able to unlock it to some of your favorite applications, what they've done with the camera app. So they're certainly adding value in some instances.
I think they're really, it comes down to that there are two classes of things that manufacturers are doing with these skins. And class number one is sometimes, and this is kind of what I'm championing, they are genuinely adding functionality. HTC's drag to the ring for lock screen adds functionality. HTC's integrating Facebook into the contact lists adds functionality. Motorola's social music player with the integrated lyrics that automatically load with every song you play, that adds functionality. But a lot of these companies are doing certain things just to differentiate. And Samsung changing all of the icons in the system randomly for no apparent purpose is probably my biggest peeve there.
So is there a risk of fragmenting? So Android is already fragmented in and of itself. When you have the manufacturers having their own skins riding on top, or software riding on top of Android, are they fragmenting the platform themselves? Or do you disagree with that?
Well, they're not fragmenting the platform in terms of what I worry most from a fragmentation perspective is from a developer perspective, and it has to do with the compatibility of third-party apps. And typically the skins don't affect that. What they are fragmenting is the user experience and how consumers can become fluent with one particular version of Android, and then they pick up a different phone, say from Samsung, and they're not fluent with that. And of course, the goal there from the OEM's perspective is to create lock-in on that OEM's products. So from their perspective, that's actually a good thing, whereas from a consumer perspective, it may not be.
Right, so someone who's used to a HTC device and they see the weather clock and then they go to an LG or something else, is like, well, where's that? And they might run back to an HTC device or something like that.
Or take that LG. LG has this crazy multiple drawer file cabinet thing with its apps tray. And everyone I know who has a non-LG Android phone, who's picked up an LG phone and looked at that, has been, what the heck? Is this even Android?
It's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So skins aren't going away anytime soon, nor do I think they should, because I think they, in the best case scenario, they add value. But OEMs could certainly be more thoughtful about what they include, especially if they have Google's help.
Well, and I think in terms of why a lot of people complain about skins has to do with their hit on speed and memory. And that's something that HTC has really improved going from Sense 3.6 to Sense 4. And it's something that OEMs need to pay a lot more attention to. I mean, if you look at benchmark results on Samsung TouchWiz phones, you see pretty clearly the hit to performance that that's the effect of TouchWiz. And OEMs have to say, you know, are all of these random icon changes worth a hit to performance?
Okay, so Chris, what's your final take? What do you think is next for this whole dynamic?
Well, I do think that Sony's model, which frankly I think they kind of pioneered and Sense 4 has in some ways adopted, I think that is the correct model. That's the way that these OEMs need to go. They need to turn their experiences, quote unquote, into widgets, into apps, and into enhancements to the stock Android look and feel. And I think that maybe over the next 2 to 3 versions of some of these major skins, for lack of a better word, we're going to see them move in that direction. At least I hope.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, guys. I don't think this debate is going to be settled anytime soon. The HTC One X has all the makings of one of the best Android phones of the year because inside this beautiful white polycarbonate design, you're getting 4G LTE speeds, a really fast processor, but most importantly, one of the best screens that we've ever seen on a mobile phone, in addition to a really fast camera on the back that shoots up to 4 frames per second. We're going to show you what we like and what we don't about the HTC One X. The centerpiece of the HTC One X is this 4.7-inch Super LCD 2 screen. That's a lot of letters right there, but what it really means is that you're getting an HD resolution and one of the brightest displays on the market. We measured a lightness reading off the charts compared to some other Android phones on the market, and it really makes a difference when it comes to viewing content. So swiping through the home screens is just as smooth as you would expect, but it really is about the video playback and enjoying photos and video. So if we go into an application like YouTube, you can really see, you know, the bright colors and an awesome contrast on a design like this. It's really like having a little movie theater in your pocket. Excellent viewing angles, and again, you're getting 1280 by 720 resolution. So it's an HD experience. If you look around the design of the HTC One X, it's very minimalist, but HTC did that on purpose because this is a unibody polycarbonate design, similar to the Nokia Lumia. It's all plastic, but it doesn't feel plastic or chintzy. It's actually very solid, and you can see that there's a slight curve up on the top and bottom, which adds a touch of elegance. And on the back, you have an 8-megapixel camera, and that brings us to one of the other best features of the One X. This takes pictures very quickly. The camera fires up in less than a second and is ready to fire. And if you're in continuous shooting mode, you can capture up to 4 frames per second. And then when you're done shooting, you can open up all the photos that you saved and select the one that you want and discard the rest. The other feature that we love about the HTC One X's camera is that when you're shooting video, you can start recording your footage and snap stills in the background, and you can see that they showed up right there. And those are full resolution images. The other thing that we love about the camera is that you have your choice of multiple effects, so you get a little Instagram-like magic built in. So what about the software experience? A lot of people have been wondering, can HTC really marry Android Ice Cream Sandwich and its own Sense software and make it a happy marriage? In our testing, we found that Sense is actually pretty easy to use on the One X, but there are some things here and there that could use some improvement. One thing that we do like is that when it comes to multitasking, this is more of a personal preference, but we like the fact that you can see the full screen apps before you swipe them off the screen, and this is a really nice way to multitask. With the stock Android Ice Cream Sandwich, you have a listing of apps right here that go right on top of whatever you're using, so some people may prefer that, but in terms of people who are first timers for Android or anyone who's new to a smartphone in general, we think that they're going to prefer this approach. But there are some things that we think are going to be a little bit awkward. So you can see here that the One X has 3 capacitive buttons, which is good. We don't mind that, but on a lot of applications you have a menu option, and that menu bar here takes up a lot of space for something that's just 3 dots. We'd love to see it migrated up here or somehow else integrated into the design, and that's something that HTC and a lot of manufacturers are going to have to work with the app developers to fix. As much as we like the fit and finish of the One X's design, having the 4.7-inch display does involve a couple of trade-offs, most important of which is the fact that the design itself is just taller and wider than a lot of people are used to, especially when compared to the iPhone 4S, which is just a lot more compact. So even though the design is nice and thin, the power button is a little hard to reach, especially those with smaller hands. But overall, we do like the design. So overall, we really love the HTC One X for AT&T for a couple of reasons. One is the big and bright 4.7-inch HD screen. It's one of the best that we've ever seen on a smartphone. And the camera is really fast and takes great looking photos. Combine that with 4G LTE speeds and enough battery life to get you through most of the day, and you have a winner.